So, dear friends, once again, I am with you, Dr. Atul Suryawanshi, MM College, Patsora, District Jalgaon of this Maharashtra state. Yesterday, we studied the few things associated with our study. Today, we are going to study a new module entitled Fiction and Short Story. This is the third unit that we are going to study. The previous week, we deliberated on research. We studied a few questions related to NET and SET regarding the research. And here in this presentation today, we are going to study fiction. So the very foremost question arises in our mind that what is fiction? So fiction is an imaginary tale. So in the very first slide, we are going to study the difference between fiction and non-fiction. Because non-fiction is the next fourth module for the study. So what is fiction? Fiction comprises fantasy, humor, adventure, mystery, horror, folktale, fairy tales, realistic fiction, historical fictions, and science fictions are there. So fiction have the element of a fantasy, humor, adventure, mystery, and horror in itself. So what about non-fiction? Non-fiction generally deals with a biography or autobiography, narrative fiction, newspapers, magazines, research journal, travelogue, self-help book, textbook, and reference book. Non-fiction generally talks about all these things. So this is the basic difference. Non-fiction is the actual writing, is the realistic writing on the life of someone else or on the life of the subject himself, which we call autobiography. Fiction is not like that. Fiction is an imaginary writing. And fantasy, humor, adventure, mystery, horror are some of the elements of fiction. So in the very first slide, I hope that your concept will be very clear regarding the difference between fiction and non-fiction. Non means not. So which is not fiction, which is not imaginary tale. So having this difference in the mind, let us proceed further to study fiction in detail now. So the types of literary fiction in prose. The very first is flash fiction. So what is flash fiction? A work of fewer than 2000 words. 1000 some definition says this. This is approximate words, around 5 pages. So this is flash fiction, means short fiction, short writing. If we have more word than that, it is called short story. A work of at least 2000 words, but under 7500 words. That means approximately 5 to 25 pages. This is short story. So the next is The bigger form of short story is a novelette. What is novelette? A work of at least 7,500 words, but under 17,500 words, approximately 25 to 60 pages, is a novelette. And we are going to study the example of the same in the coming next slides. The bigger form of a novelette is a novella. So what is novella? Novella is a work of at least 17,500 words, but under 50,000 words, means approximately 60 to 170 pages, is a novella. Jonathan Livingston Seagull, written by Richard Bach, the famous American writer, is the best example of novella in literature. The next is novel. The bigger form, the greater form of novella is novel. So novel is a work of at least 50,000 words or more words. Approximately more than 170 pages are there in novel. Epic is bigger than novel in the length. So a work of more than 2 lakhs words, about 680 pages. One page comprises 300 words approximately, is the longest form, epic. So we are going to study all these things here in this presentation today. Flash fiction, short story, novelette, novella, novel, and epic is the content. I hope that this is very clear to you in the very beginning. So let's begin with the types of literary fiction in prose now. The very first type, flash fiction. Flash fiction is a genre of fiction defined as a very short story. It is fewer than 2,000 words. As I told you, around 5 pages are there. So this is the shortest form of the story, flash fiction. We can read it in a flash. This is shorter in length, and so is the reason flash fiction, the name is given to this. An attempt has been made here to cite the select examples of the flash fiction here for your kind perusal. The first is Curriculum by Sejal Shah. 488 words are there in this writing. The next example of flash fiction is Stick by George Saunders, 392 words. The next example is The Huntress by Sophia Samata, 374 words. The next is Miracles by Lucy Corrine, 369 words. The next is Unlikable by Dave Olin Unfred, 331 words. The next example of flash fiction is The Baby Dolls by Berkey Robinson, 174 words. And the last example, which has been cited here, Give It Up by Franz Fanon, 134 words only. So this is flash fiction. The shorter form of story up to 2,000 words, around 5 pages, is a flash fiction. So this material is enough for you to make your concept very clear of flash fiction. Let us turn towards the next slide in the series. Is after flash fiction, there is types of literary fiction in prose, short story. So what is short story? Short story is a work of at least 2,000 words, but under 7,500 words, means approximately 5 to 25 pages are there in short story. So short story is the bigger form of a flash story, flash fiction. Select examples are here. The very first example, The Famous Story, written by Oscar Wilde, published in 1888, entitled The Happy Prince. This is the best example of this. The prince who gave away everything, and the mediator was that bird who always helped the happy prince, is the everlasting and green story in children's fiction. The next is The Yellow Wallpaper, which published in 1892 by Charlotte Gilman. So Charlotte Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper is the story of a female character entitled Jane. Jane, with her husband John, goes there to rest at a place. And there she tears up the wallpaper. She visualizes and falls prey of hallucinations and all that. She becomes restless and becomes the prey of psychosis. So the story is about a hysterical woman, the wallpaper. The next story is The Monkey's Paw, which published in 1902 by W. W. Jacob. And the next story that I have cited here is The Gift of the Magi, which published in 1905 by Arthur Henry. William Sidney Porter is the original name of this writer, Arthur Henry. So Gift of the Magi is a story of a husband and a wife who gives a gift to each other on the occasion, sacred occasion of Christmas. But the gift that they offer to each other proves to be futile, useless. So Magi is the word used here, which has been used for the very first time in Christianity. Magi means the clever people, the intelligent people. So Gift of Magi is again an evergreen story written by Arthur Henry, that means William Sidney Porter. So this is about short story. So we should try to understand this reality that short story is a work of 2,000 words up to 5 to 25 pages approximately. More than that. So the next is, after short story, there is novelite. So what is novelite? It is the kind of the short story less than 10,000 words. 25 to 60 pages are there in novelite. For example, The Fall of the House of Usher, which published in 1839 by Edgar Allan Poe, is the best example of novelite, which is the short version of novella, remember, and greater than short story. The second example, Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which published in 1886 by the Scottish author R.L. Stevenson, are the best example of novelite. So, one thing is very clear, that novelite is the bigger form of a short story and a lesser form, or it is less than novella. So let's go to the next slide here in this series. The type of the literary fictions in prose that we're going to study here is novella. So what is novella? Novella is more than 10,000 words, up to 40,000 words. So novella comprises this word limit, 10,000 to 40,000 words. Means approximately 25 to 60 pages are there in the novella. So this is bigger than novelite and shorter than novel. So we should try to know these forms in literature. So it would be beneficial for us at the time of at the time when we will study for NET and SET examination. I hope that your concept is very clear. So the best examples of novella are, the first example is Animal Farm, which published in 1945, written by George Orwell. The original name of this writer is Eric Blair. So what is the theme of Animal Farm? Animal Farm describes the revolt of all the pigs against the human master. But no, the revolt has been suppressed by a bigger pig. His name was Napoleonite. He suppressed the mutiny of those pigs, and the conditions remains the same as it was before in the Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others is the punchline used in Animal Farm of George Orwell. So this is the best example of novella. The second example is Heart of Darkness, which was published in 1899, written by Joseph Conrad. So the narrator of Heart of Darkness is a Marlowe who goes interior the river Congo to visit Mr. Kurtz. At the end of this novella, Mr. Kurtz passed away from this world, shouting the words, "The horror, the horror." So this is the ending of the novella. This is somewhat mysterious for the readers. Heart of Darkness is the heart of South Africa. So this is the best example of novella written in English literature ever. The next example is written by the famous American writer which he published in 1970, entitled Jonathan Livingston Seagull. So Jonathan is a seabird, is a seagull who wants to achieve new flights of flying. But the elders, his parents, restricted him to do so. They warn him not to achieve new heights of the flying. It is their prime task to collect the food merely. But Jonathan was ambitious. He attempted his best to achieve the new flights, and in doing the same adventure, he died. But Jonathan became a symbol for the other seagulls to follow. He became an ideal personality. So Jonathan Livingston Seagull symbolically indicates man's journey from an ordinary level to in the direction of the progress. So this story, novella, Jonathan Livingston Seagull, is the best example of man's humble journey towards perfection. Okay, this is about novella. I repeat, novella is the work approximately between 10,000 to 40,000 words. 25 to 60 pages are there in novella. So the next form, bigger than novella, is a novel. Novel is a work of 50,000 words up to 1 lakh words. About more than 170 pages are there in the novel. Okay, this is approximate limit. What we are talking about here. The present English word novel is derived from the Italian word novella, which means new. So this is the new form. Remember, this is in the writing. And so is the reason this is known as novella. A novel is a relatively long narrative fiction which describes intimate human experiences, normally in the prose form. So what do we talk about in the novel? As the very word novel indicates, a new novelty. So it is a genre of fiction which informs us about human experiences in the prose form. We have so many human experiences, and which have been classified further into the types of the novel that we are going to study in the very next coming slides. So I hope that the concept of the novel is very clear. The work, more than 170 pages, having the word length approximately 1 lakh. So let's proceed further. The traits, characteristics, or the features for a novel. It is written in prose as opposed to verse. It is not verse, it is in the prose form. The second quality is of considerable length, or the word count. It has approximate word count or length in the pages, as I told you already. The novelette and the novella and the novel, they have certain length. The next important feature or characteristic of the novel is it is in the fictional content. So it is fiction, it is imaginary totally. This is the third important feature. And the next fourth is individualism, both on the pages and for the intended audience. So it is the human experience to narrate. which everyone means visualizes in the society around us. So these are the few traits for the novel. Let's proceed further on the very next slide. Element of novel. Before going to study the type of the novel in the series, it would be better to focus on the select elements of novel in brief. So the first element of novel is theme. So what is theme? Theme is the central idea in the novel which can be expressed in a nutshell. A literary theme is the main idea or underlying meaning a writer explores in a novel or other literary works. The theme of a story can be conveyed using characters, setting, dialogue, plot, a combination of all these elements. So, theme is the gist, is the central idea, the story of the novel, in brief. So, this is the core, this is the heart of the novel. Let's proceed further towards the second element of the novel in series, which is plot. So, plot is essentially the story or the course of events that make up the theme. It is created by the conflict, either internal or external. So, two type of plots are there. Two type of conflict that the plot narrates. Conflict of the mind. Mind means it is the conflict, internal conflict at the psychoanalytical level. External conflict means the conflict with other characters or other entities. Plot may be simple or complex. Two types of plots are there. So plot is the sequence of connected events that make up a narrative in a novel. So it is associated, it connects one event with other. Generally, a plot in fiction builds up to a climax and ends in a revolution at the end of the story. So plot is a section of the story that we can talk about. The next is character. So character, a literary character is a person or animal or any object or thing presented as a person in the narrative. There are two types regarding characters. The first is protagonist. Protagonist simply means the central character in the novel is known as protagonist. And when we talk about antagonist, antagonist is the villain or enemy shown in the novel. Okay, so I hope that you would remember these two terms, protagonist and antagonist. Anti means opposite. So there are two types of characters, protagonist and antagonist. According to the temperament and nature of the characters, again there are two characters, flat character and round character. There are the two types of characters. So what is the meaning of the word flat character? Flat character means those characters who do not change their nature, their temperament in the course of the novel. They remain static. They don't change their nature at all. They are not dynamic characters. They remain rigid and stubborn till the end of the novel. We can take the example of Charles Dickens' novel, for example. Most of the characters depicted in the novel of Charles Dickens are the best example of flat characters who do not change their nature in the course of the novel. They are flat characters. The second is a round character. A round character are those characters who change their nature, their temperament in the development of the novel. If they are rigid in the very beginning, they become soft at the end of the novel. So these characters are dynamic in their nature. They keep changing, they adjust with the situation, they mold according to the situation. Those characters are round characters. For example, the characters depicted in the select novels of Jane Austen. For example, we can take the novel Pride and Prejudice for sample. The character Elizabeth in that novel is the best example of round character, who eventually marries with Fitzwilliam Darcy in the novel. So this is the example of round character. So I hope now the concept of all the student is very clear regarding flat characters and round characters. The characters who doesn't change are flat characters. The character who changes the temperament is round character. The next element in the series is a setting. So setting is the time and place in which the story takes place. It includes place, period, time, climate, weather, lifestyle. So these are the essential time, place, action, environment are very important, plays very crucial role in the setting. So most of the time, the combination of time, place, and action is known as setting in English. This is very clear. Let us turn towards the next element of the novel, which is conflict. Conflict is widely known as the soul of the novel. Without conflict, life cannot exist. So the struggle between the opposite forces in the story in the novel is called conflict. Conflict in the novel provides interest and curiosity about the plot. So as I told you earlier that conflict is the soul of the novel. Again, there are two types of conflict mentioned in literature: internal conflict and external conflict. The internal conflict deals with psychological conflict in the mind, and the external conflict deals with the conflict with other forces, other elements, or any person, any animal. This is an external conflict. So the next element is a language or style. The language and the techniques used by the author for the narration of the course of event is known as the style. An author can use extensive vocabulary and high phrases, or he may be laconic. Means he may use maximum words, or he may use minimum words, that means economy of the words, laconic in the tone. So language matters after all. The author's word choice, sentences, structure, figurative language, and the sentence arrangement play key role in the novel. So this thing can be studied under stylistics in research. I cited the example of Igbo language in Africa continent. The Igbo people, they have their own style of speaking the language. It is altogether different variety which has been asked in the NET and SET examination. Igbo language is a unique variety of the language in South Africa. So language is an important element for writing the novel. After studying the select elements of the novel, now let's proceed further to study the types of the novels. An attempt has been made here on the slide to show select important types of the novel. The first is realistic novel, second picaresque, third historical, fourth epistolary, fifth gothic, sixth autobiographical, seventh allegorical, eighth utopian, ninth dystopian novel, 10th psychological novel, 11th stream of consciousness technique, 12th Bildungsroman, 13th pastoral, and the 14th detective novel. So these are the select novels presented here for your kind perusal. Let's proceed further. The very first type of the novel is a realistic novel. Realistic novel is a piece of fiction that gives the effect of realism and is also called the novel of manner. It can be characterized by its complex characters with mixed motives that are rooted in the social class. So the element of realism is there in the realistic novel. Though novels are means what we say imaginary in their tone, it is in the fiction form, but still at some level there are somewhat realism is there. Realistic elements are there in the realistic novel. An example has been cited here, Midnight's Children, which published in 1981, written by the famous writer Salman Rushdie, is the best example of realistic novel. So, Midnight's Children is the story of the protagonist Salim Sinai, who born at midnight 12 o'clock when India received freedom. So, this is the story of Salim Sinai. This question was asked in the NET and SET examination. So, Midnight's Children of Salman Rushdie is the best example of realistic novel because it is associated with the freedom movement of India. So, some realistic elements are there in the novel. This is first type. The second type of the novel, Picaresque novel. So, the word picaro is a Spanish word which means a rug or a person who performs adventures. Is picaro. This is Spanish word. A picaresque novel narrates the adventures of the protagonist who is an eccentric or a disreputable person, and this is always in the form of episodes. So this is picaresque. So a picaro is always a wanderer who wanders everywhere performing adventures or misadventures. This is picaresque novel, remember. The best example of picaresque novel is written by Mark Twain. The original name of this writer is Samuel Clemens. Mark Twain means. The novel entitled The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, written in 1884 and 1885, are the best example of picaresque novel in the series. You can see the picture here. Huckleberry Finn is drifting on the river Mississippi along with his friend, the Negro slave Jim. So this is the story of a Jim and Huck. So this is the satire on America itself, though the writer is from America. So this is the best example of picaresque novel, where the hero is always wandering from one place to another. So this is the best example of picaresque novel, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn of Mark Twain. The next example type of the novel is a historical novel, which deals with the element of history. A historical novel is a novel set in a historical period which narrates past happenings. For example, Leo Tolstoy's best novel, War and Peace, which was written in 1867. So this novel, War and Peace, focuses on the theme of Napoleon's attack on Russia. So the theme of these novels revolves around destruction, war, and the motive means what we say the message of the novel is peace. So this is the historical novel, War and Peace, written by Leo Tolstoy. Element of history are there. Next novel in the series is an epistolary novel. The word epistle means later. So epistolary, this word has been derived from the Latin word epistola, which means a letter. The epistolary novel is that in which the novelist presents the narrative through a series of correspondence or other documents. Although letters are the most common basis for epistolary novel. If epistle means letter is not there, some sort of diaries, writings are there in an exceptional case. The best example of epistolary novel is Saul Bellows Herzog, which published in 1964. Saul Bellow is the writer who received Nobel Prize in 1976 for his best writing. He is an American writer. And he published Harjog in 1964. So Harjog is the story of the scholar person Harjog who is pursuing his research in the university. He divorced his first wife because she was very average and ordinary woman. And he marries another woman. She was Madeline Portrait, who was exceptionally beautiful and fair lady, and she was intelligent also. One day he acquires his wife, second wife, to his best friend, Valentine Gersbach. When after some days, his wife, Madeline, elopes with his friend, leaving Harjog alone once again. Harjog decides to take revenge of this. He goes to kill his friend at his home early in the morning, and he visualizes the scene that his friend is bathing his daughter. He come back and wrote a letter of congratulation to his wife and to his best friend for happy married life forever, and the novel ends. So the theme of this novel is adjustment. Adjustment is life is the theme of this novel. If we cannot adjust, we cannot survive. Is the best example of epistolary novel in the series. The next is Gothic novel. So let me tell you, Goth is a German tribe. In the 14th century, a mysterious, highly mysterious tribe was Goth. They live in the forest, and so is the word Gothic has been taken. The novels that include terror, mystery, horror, thriller, supernatural elements, doom, death, decay, haunted buildings, and castles are presented in the Gothic novels. The best example of this Gothic novel is Dracula, which published in 1897, written by Bram Stoker. So this novel was asked in net and set examination. So remember, this novel is very important for the sake of exam. Dracula, written by Bram Stoker, contains the Gothic elements. So Gothic means full of horror and suspense. It is mysterious, because the Goth tribe which was living in the Germany, the way they lead the life there in Germany was highly mysterious. The next type is autobiographical novel. So the autobiographical novel is a novel based on the life of the author himself. Sometimes the author changes the places and names of the characters, or even may change or avoid certain details of his life. It may or may not be in the first person narration, but it deals with autobiographical element in it. And the best example of autobiographical novel is a David Copperfield, written by Charles Dickens in 1850. In the very beginning of the novel, Charles Dickens says, "I'm the fond parent of every child, and in my heart of heart there is a favorite child, and his name is David Copperfield," and the novel begins. So this is not the protagonist David Copperfield, what the writer is talking about. He is talking about himself. This is the story of Charles Dickens himself. Charles Dickens, see the initials in Charles Dickens, C and D, has been inversed in David Copperfield, D and C. So this is the inversion of the name. So there are autobiographical elements in the novel. This is the best example of autobiographical novel in English literature. David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. The next novel in the series is a allegorical novel. So allegory is a story that bears more than one level of meaning. Multiple meanings are there. The surface meaning of such novel is different from the symbolic meaning. This is allegory. For example, Lord of the Flies, which published in 1954, published by the British writer William Golding, is the best example of this allegorical novel. So what is the theme of this A lot of those flies. Two group of students were there. The story takes place at the time of the Second World War. To save the life of the students, the students were kept inside the plane, and the passenger tube get detached from the plane and falls down into the forest. And the students were in the forest, and one group tries to control over the other group. This is the story. But the writer is not talking about the children. The writer is talking about the adults in the society. If we take away law, order from the society, the people will behave in their own way. The people will behave like beasts. They will kill them. They will murder the people. They will steal. They will rob. They will rape. So this novel is the best example of allegorical novel, Lord of the Flies, written by William Golding. William Golding received Nobel in 1983 for his best literary works. The next example is utopian novel. Utopia means haven, remember. Utopia is an imaginary community, a society possessing the ideal qualities. It is a common literary theme in science fiction or speculative fiction. Utopian novel shows idealized things, that everything is good. And the best example of utopian writing is Candide, which published in 1759 by the famous French scholar Voltaire, who wrote Candide. This is the best example of utopian writing. Opposite to utopia is a dystopia. So this is one type again is there, a dystopian novel. Dystopian fiction is a genre describing an imaginary place where life is extremely bad because of the deprivation or oppression or terror. Some problem is there in dystopian novels. There is chaos, disorder, mismatching in dystopian novel. So the best example of dystopian novel in the series is 1984, which published in 1949, written by George Orwell, Eric Blair. This is the best example of dystopian novel, which talks about chaos, disorder, and mismatching in the novel. Bad element in the life in this novel. The next example is a psychological novel. So psychological novel is a novel that focuses on the complex mental and emotional lives of the characters and exposes the various levels of mental activity. So these novels in brief focuses the conflict of the protagonist or the central character in the novel at the mental level. And the best example of this type of novel is Cry the Peacock, published in 1963, written by Anita Desai, the topmost writer in Indian writing in English. So this is the Cry the Peacock is the story of Maya and Gautam. One day, an astrologer visits Maya and informs predicts her that her husband would die. She was so strongly haunted by the concept of the death of her husband that at some event when she was talking with her husband on the terrace, she pushes him from the terrace and be the cause of his death. So this is a psychological novel which deals with the psyche of the characters, the complicated and intricate development of the mind inside the mind. This is psychological novel. The next type is a stream of consciousness novel. So this term stream of consciousness was coined by William James in his best book Principles of Psychology, which he published in 1890. It means the flow of the thought, the coherent and continuous flow of the thinking in the mind is stream of consciousness. Incidents in the plot are in the sequence of their occurrences. The novelist narrates them as they enter in the mind of the characters. And the best example of the stream of consciousness novel is James Joyce's Ulysses, which he published in 1922. This is the best example of stream of consciousness novel, which deals with the thought process, coherent thought process of the protagonist in the novel. The next type is a Bildungsroman novel. So what is it? This is the German word Bildungsroman. It indicates growth. So such novels that deal with the growth and the development of the character. They deal with reformation, education. So this is highly intellectual type of the novel. The fictional biography or autobiography is concerned with the growth of the protagonist's mind, spirit, and characters from their childhood to adulthood. It is called a novel of education or the novel of reformation. Remember, for example, Harry Potter, the series of the 7 fantasy novels written by the British writer J.K. Rowling are the best example of Bildungsroman, where the development of Harry from a child to an adult has been presented in the 7 series novel. So this is the best example of Bildungsroman novel. It meant for reformation. It meant for education. It is meant for growth and development. Bildungsroman is a German word. Let us turn towards the next novel in the series, pastoral novel. So what is pastoral novel? It is the class of the literature that presents the society of the shepherds as a free from complexity and corruptions of the city life. So pastoral novel deals with the life in the village or the pastoral rural area. The best example is cited here, Far from the Madding Crowd, which published in 1874 by Thomas Hardy, the famous Victorian writer. So Far from the Madding Crowd is the story of Sergeant Troy, Bathsheba Everdeen, and Gabriel Oak. Gabriel Oak was a simple farmer. He is always with his cattle. He is very simple in his nature, and he was in love with Bathsheba Everdeen. But Bathsheba married Sergeant Troy because, he was tantalizing, he was somewhat smart, and eventually the marriage knot proves to be futile, useless. Again, she inclines towards Gabriel Oak, and the patience of the Gabriel Oak finally rewarded in the novel. So, the setting of the novel is in the village, in the rural area. So, the novel containing such a rural element are known as pastoral novel in English. I hope your concept is very clear. Let us turn towards the next type of the novel, which is detective fiction. Detective fiction is a subgenre of the crime fiction and mystery fiction. This is the subtype of crime fiction and mystery fiction, in which an investigator, the protagonist, the central character, investigates something. The detective solves the crime. Detective solves some problem, like James Bond 007. The best example of detective fiction is The Hound of the Baskervilles, which published in 1902, written by the British writer, the famous one, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So this is the best example of detective fiction. And detective fiction, again, is like Gothic novel, is full of mystery, suspense, horror, castles, pounding, shouting is there in detective fictions. They are full of suspense and horror. So, my dear friends, I hope that your concept regarding the types of the novel is very clear. So the very first question arises in the mind while studying the type of the novel that what can be, which can be the first novel in the world. So the first novel in the world is entitled as The Tale of Jinji. This is widely considered to be one of the world's first novel written in a Japanese language between about 1000 to 1012. So this is the first and the foremost novel written in literature ever from Japan, The Tale of Jinji, written by Murasaki Shikibu. Murasaki Shikibu is the talented novelist from Japan. So the next question arises in the mind that which can be the first novel in English literature then? So the first English novel is Daniel Defoe's Robinson Crusoe, which was considered to be the first novel written ever in English literature, which published in 1719. The novel is about a man, Robinson Crusoe, who spent 20 years on a deserted island and adventures he encountered while on the island. So Robinson Crusoe is adventurous novel written by Daniel Defoe, and this is the first novel ever written in English literature in the 17th century. So after novel, let us try to clarify the term epic. So what is epic? Epic is the long poem that informs the story of a hero's adventure. It is a work of approximately 2 lakh words or more than that, means approximately more than 680 pages. The longest poem, longest verse. Counting a page roughly about 300 words on a page. The best example of epic in English is the Iliad and the Odyssey, written by the great poet Homer. So these are the best examples written by Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Regarding India, when we think about the context here in Indian writing in English, here are 2 epics. The first epic, which was written by the great sage Valmiki, the Ramayana. So Ramayana is a Sanskrit epic from ancient India, an important epic of Hinduism. Maharshi Valmiki narrates the life of Ram, a legendary prince of Ayodhya. So this is the first epic from India. The next epic here in the series is the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is a Sanskrit epic of ancient India. It narrates the war between 2 groups of cousins in Kurukshetra. With a fight for the land, there was enmity, hostility between 2 groups of the cousins, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. So Mahabharata is the second example of epic from India. These are the 2 examples of epic. So I hope that after novel, the concept of epic is very clear now. So here, we are at the end of this presentation. I hope that your concept regarding short story, novelite, novella, then novel, and finally epic is very clear. I have attempted to cite you the examples of each type of the novel in English. So I request you at this end of this presentation to visit the websites to surf the internet and to collect more information of the types of the novels. Search them, see the theme, search the characters, go through it so that the content should be cemented and you will get better results in the NET and SET examinations. So let us end this presentation today with a firm faith in God. Have a nice time, my dear friends. In tomorrow's presentation, we will study more about novels, short stories, and the questions related to it. So, thank you very much for being with me always very positively. Have a nice time. God bless you all. Let's stop. Jai Hind.